Our politicians are corrupt. There is massive unemployment. The level of poverty in the country is alarming. Nigeria is in trouble. The last election was a joke. Our politicians read it as usual. Tade listened as his friend rambled on about Nigeria's socio-political problems. It was not the first time, and sadly, it was not going to be the last time he had heard something like that before. In fact, he had been hearing similar things since he was a kid, and it now sounded like a broken record in his ears. He was in a clubhouse with his friends, and they were having a nice time. It was early in the evening, around 7 p.m., and there was music everywhere. When it was 8:30 p.m., he went back to his room in the Agbawo area of Ibadan. He was a 300-level student of mechanical engineering in University of Ibadan, and he was in his first semester. He shared the room with 3 of his friends. When he got to his apartment, his roommates were around and they were watching movies. However, he was not interested, and so he just slept off. When he woke up in the middle of the night, he was surprised to hear one of his friends, Henry, talking in a feminine voice with someone on his mobile phone. His voice sounded so feminine that anyone that did not see him would believe it was a woman that was talking. "My dear, I am really lonely here and I wish I could be with you now. I love you so much and I think about you every time," he said in a sweet feminine voice. As he listened to the telephone conversation, he deduced that the person on the other line had promised to send him some money, and this made him to be inquisitive. "Henry, what are you doing on the phone?" he asked when he finished with his phone call. "That was a maga. He will soon send some money," he replied with a smile on his face. "What do you mean by that?" "Well, you should know by now. He thinks I am a woman and he wants to date me. That is what most boys are doing." "I thought you know about all this by now," he replied. At this juncture, Tade asked him more questions about what he was doing, but Henry was rather elusive and did not answer him very well. A few days later, he accompanied him to the bank where they collected the money by Western Union money transfer. It was a large amount of money, $25,000, and he could not believe his eyes when he saw it. As Henry gave him part of the money, he was stunned and did not even know what to say. Tade was from a poor family, and he often had to do odd jobs in order to be able to pay his education. His family based in Lagos, and his 2 older brothers and a sister who were university graduates were unemployed. The 3rd sibling had a job, but it was a meager and was not even enough for his transport fare. From childhood, he hated poverty and he vowed to get out of it no matter what. He was a hustler by nature, and when he was not attending lectures, he sold recharge cards to passers-by at the school gates in his spare time. Also, he occasionally rode commercial motorcycles, Okada, in weekends in order to make ends meet. Due to his persistent poverty that never seems to go away, he finally persuaded Henry, his friend, to teach him the intricacies of internet fraud. He wanted the good things of life, and so he eagerly learnt it with all his heart. His first victim, or maga, was a man called John Stones, who lives in the United States of America. He simply lied to him he was a lady and sent him nude pictures of a woman that he had downloaded from the internet. It took him 3 months to get money from him, but it was worth the effort. It was only $800, but that was a handsome sum of money in Nigeria currency. He screamed in ecstasy the day he received the money through the Western Union money transfer at the bank. He left the bank, ran down the street, and then went to eat in a fast food joint. He had not handled such an amount of money before, and he could scarcely believe his eyes. As some young men will do, he decided to enjoy himself with the money, and so he organized a big party in a nightclub in Dube, a place in Ibadan. It was a big party, and a lot of scantily dressed ladies were all over the place. He brought the most expensive wine. He and his friends drank themselves to stupor. In fact, in his drunken state and ecstasy, he poured some of the wine on the floor in order to display how rich he had become. Afterward, he simply went on spending spree like the biblical prodigal son. He finished the money in a short period of time, and then he needed more money. As a result of this, he fully immersed himself in internet fraud and spent a lot of time in front of his newly acquired laptop looking for one victim or the other. In fact, he stopped attending lectures regularly as he somewhat lost interest in his studies. He was into ladies by now, and one of his favorite lovers called Beatrice, a tall, fair-skinned lady, and was very carefree. He made a lot of money anyway, and after a few months, he rented an apartment for himself in Agbawo, Ibadan, and his girlfriend Beatrice visited him often there. The lecture had been long and boring. He was glad when it was finally over. His best friends in the class were sitting beside him, and they were surprised he bothered to come to class today, as he was known to be a truant. After the class, the three friends went to his newly rented apartment. When they were inside, his two friends engaged themselves in a quarrel that seemed very interesting to him. Chukwuma was an intellectual friend of his who often voiced out his opinion on various issues. Look, going to see a babalawo to do charms is backward and superstitious. These charms don't work. I mean, the other day, I heard that people are now using ladies' pants as charms in order to make money. This is pure superstition. What you call juju is nonsense and a product of primitive African thinking, he said. Mr. Professor, all this philosophy you have learned is affecting you. Look, African juju is real. I pray it does not affect you one day. There is a girl in Port Harcourt who was used for ritual by one of these rich politicians. She was a runs girl that sleeps with rich men for money. Unfortunately, she fell into the hands of a ritualist and she went missing. When she was found, she had run mad and her parents had to take her to a pastor for prayers. Dajo replied, "That is rubbish and superstition. The problem with us in this country is that our worldview is not scientific. This stuff of yours cannot be proven scientifically. The world is scientific. Stop all this badadash." At this point, they descended into an argument. Tade did not say anything as he had not really thought about it before and he really had no opinion about the issue. It was a cold morning and Tade rolled on his bed. He had spent the night with one of his numerous girlfriends and he really enjoyed himself. A few minutes later, his phone rang and he knew who was on the line. It was his best friend Henry and they had an important appointment. He sent his lover away and went to his place immediately. Soon, the two of them were going out of Ibadan to Ijabode. He had told him what they were going to do and after thinking about it for some time, he had decided to consent to it. When he got to Ijabode, they went to a house located in a small town called Itulupe. When they entered, they saw a middle-aged man sitting in the middle of various fetish items and occultist paraphernalia. There were various carved idols in front of him, and generally everything about him looked sinister. "Ah, my son, you have come today," he said. "Yes, Baba, you know I will always come to you," he replied, as he and Henry prostrated before him. The two young men sat down on a stool that was on each side of the witch doctor. "So, my children, what do you want again? Henry, who is this young man you have brought here? I am glad you are here anyway." "It is not anything, Baba. He is just my friend. We are into Yahoo business together, and you know it is not easy to find maga." "Yes, my son," replied the witch doctor, while waving his head. "Well, Baba, what I want is a charm that I will put in my mouth so that whenever I ask those white or Oyibo people for anything, they will give it to me. Generally, I want those people I meet on the internet to do whatever I tell them to do, he replied. Well, my son, that is very easy. I will give you these charms, he said. He brought out some charms from the bag in front of him. They all looked strange and sinister. Tade was shocked when he saw it. The Baba took one of the charms in his hands and said, Look, this is Afose. Put it in your mouth when you are talking to white people. They will always do what you say. He also gave them a bowl and told him to put his leg in it when he was talking to one of his magas on the internet. After this, Tade and Henry brought out the pictures of the white people they were trying to swindle. The man took the pictures and chanted incantations for 15 minutes, and then he smiled and said, These people will hear your voice as long as they live where the sun shines. After this, he gave them further instruction on how they will use their charms, and they left. Tade sat down in 411 nightclub with his friends, and they were having a nice time together. Henry in particular had made some money from his criminalistic activities, and he attributed his success to the efficacy of his charms. There was a large bottle of beer in front of him, and he drank from it with music blaring around him. Tade was lively, and he went from one topic to another. After some time, the topic switched to the fact that internet crime, popularly called Yahoo, was not really good. Tade did not really have anything to say about it, but Henry, on the other hand, was very outspoken on the issue. Look, I don't see anything wrong with Yahoo business. The white man has always exploited Africans right from the days of the slave trade when they carried our forefathers away. We are paying them back in their own coin. The white man is even still exploiting us. America and Europe are part of the reasons Nigeria and Africa is poor. Also, I don't see anything with using charms against them. Our charms, or as they call it, fetish practices, are working. Let us use what we have. If we don't have technology, at least we have African charms and magic. That is what is called African technology. Let Yahoo carry on, jare. After all, the government does not provide jobs for anybody. And internet crime in itself can be seen as a form of poverty alleviation, he said. Most people agreed with his line of reasoning, except for one middle-aged man who sat on a corner of the nightclub. He expressed the opinion that internet crime was not good, but most people did not agree with him. The church was rather big and expansive, with many people, particularly youths, inside it. Tade followed his friend Henry to church. As he enjoyed the convivial atmosphere, he saw one of his numerous girlfriends in the choir, and he waved to her, but she did not see him. Henry was also in the choir, and he was dressed in a black suit. As he sang with the choir members, the young man that was preaching was a dashing, handsome, fast-talking young man. He sounded intelligent and articulated. Towards the end of service, he paused and said, You should learn to give to the Lord. Giving is the secret of receiving. If you give to the Lord, you will become a millionaire. The Lord has laid it in my heart that there are 10 people here who can give 200,000 naira to the church project. At this point, about 15 people came out to make their pledges, and to his surprise, his friend Henry also came out to make his pledge. In his heart, he wondered if the pastor knew that Henry was into internet fraud and in fact money rituals. After the service, he went to his girlfriend Beatrice that was in the choir. She was one of his best lovers, and he finally had a nice time with her. She was a funny and carefree lady. She always had something to say. When he told her that he was surprised that a Yahoo boy like Henry was an active member of the church, and in fact he was donating money to the church, Beatrice chid him for his ignorance. She told him that a lot of young men who were attending the church were into internet fraud, and in fact it was an open secret. Tade liked what he had anyway, and from that day on, he started attending the church regularly. Tade and Henry went to the witch doctor's shrine again in order to reinforce their charms. Tade did not really like using charms and fetish objects, but whatever the witch doctor was doing seemed to be working, and they were making a lot of money, and so he set his reservations aside. Henry, on the other hand, took it like fish to water. He was greedy and he wanted more money, as what he realized from his internet crime was now too meager for the kind of expensive lifestyle he had developed over time. The man, as usual, said all sorts of incantations and gave them even more fetish objects, but what he requested for at the end of the day shocked him to his bone marrow. Henry, on his part, was unperturbed anyway, and in fact he was eager to do anything that would fetch him more money. The Hummer Jeep drove in front of the fast food joint with tinted glasses. The car was a thing of beauty, and he strode along like a beauty queen to everybody's admiration. It parked in the parking lot and a beautiful lady alighted from it, and then the Jeep drove off again. Immediately the car drove off, she started tearing her dress and she became half naked. She also started dancing to non-existent music supplied by her imagination, and then she started shouting and running around. In a nutshell, she had run mad. After running around for some time, she stood and kept on shouting. A large crowd gathered and people felt sorry for her. People said different things. Some people said she had been used for rituals. In fact, there was an attempt to get the car that dropped her, but the car had speed off and nobody could catch up with it. Few days later, Tade accompanied Henry to the bank as he deposited a huge amount of money at the bank. When they got home to their residence in Agbawo, Ibadan, Henry took him aside and said, "Look, you may not believe me, but using that girl for charm worked. Ever since I made that girl run mad, money has been flowing into our hands anyhow. Chukwuma is wrong. The charms are working and I'm getting richer. But you making that girl to run mad is very wicked of you. I mean, I don't even know what to think. That girl has a family and you are very wicked," Tade retorted. "Look, I don't care. Life itself is not fair. I rubbed the charms on her private part after making love to her, and now her destiny has been transferred to me," Henry replied. "I used to think all of this is superstition, but now I don't even know what to believe. If Chukwuma was around, he would say the girl was suffering from some psychotic or psychiatric disorder, but rather your charms did the damage on her. Anyway, we are making money, but we have to be careful as you, Henry, are getting too evil for my liking," Tade replied. The music was loud, soothing and enchanting. His best friend Henry was now a millionaire. In fact, he built a new house recently to everyone's surprise, and as a result, he organized a big party to celebrate his latest achievement. There were alcohol everywhere, and Henry on his part drank to stupor. His girlfriend Stacy was by his side. She tapped him by the shoulder and said, "Look at the door." As he looked towards where she was pointing, he could not believe his eyes. Some policemen with guns were standing at the door. The whole place was now silent as everybody was shocked. Before he had the time to say anything, they handcuffed him alongside with some young men at the party, including Tade. Nemesis had caught up with him at last. The witch doctor, or Babalawo, had assured him that he would not be caught, but time had proven him wrong. The police investigated their case, and what they discovered even took him, Tade, by surprise. They found out that Henry was actually into money rituals. In other words, he was killing people for money ritual. In fact, he, Tade, was linked to the crime. However, after further investigation, he was exempted from it, but then he was found guilty of internet fraud, impersonation, obtaining money under pretenses, and other crimes. Their judgment was fast and swift. The evidence was too obvious. "You are hereby sentenced to 18 months in jail without an option of fine." The judge said with an air of finality in his voice. On this particular day, Tade broke down in tears, and he did not even know what to say or think. Henry's punishment was harsher. He was sentenced to 7 years imprisonment as the policemen led them to jail. After 18 months, Tade walked out of the gate of the prison with a sigh of relief. His mother and brother were waiting for him. The prison warder escorted him to the gate, and he hugged his mother and brother with tears in his eyes. His mother could not totally condemn him because the money he made from his illegal business was used to pay for the rent of the house they were staying in Isolo, Lagos, and in general to take care of the family. When he was back in Lagos, he visited some of his friends and they tried to persuade him to go back into internet crime. They told him that if only he had been smart enough, he could escape the long arm of the law. In fact, some of his friends were still very rich and they had not been caught for their crimes. He incidentally was now back to square one, and the temptation of going back into crime was very strong. Few months later, one of his friends took him to a beer parlor, and as usual, most people were discussing football and politics. A young man called Dele was leading the discussion. Look, the country is still in shambles. According to the United Nations report, Nigeria is now the poverty capital of the world. 75% of Nigerians now live below the poverty line. Tade had had something like this ever since he was a kid. He thought of his own future and how he and his family could get out of poverty. His elder brother was earning peanuts in his newfound job, and his second older brother and sister were still unemployed. At this point, he wondered if he should go back into his life of internet crime. After all, some of his friends had not been caught, and they promised him they would teach him how to outsmart the police. As he sat in the beer parlor, he realized he was in a dilemma and wondered what was next. He went home and couldn't sleep at night as he was thinking of what next to do. A thought came into his mind to pray. He pushed it aside because praying is something he had never done in his life. He just go to church for show. It came in repeatedly. He then decided to pray and ask God for mercy and direction. He knelt down beside his bed to pray. After praying, he felt relief. He lay down and slept. The next day, he prayed again and later went out in search for a job. God saw his effort to live right, and God showed him mercy and gave him a job. Tade applied to be a worker in a rice production company. His application was accepted. He was employed with a good salary, enough to pay his family house rent and take care of their daily needs. Thank you for staying till the end. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, share to help the channel grow. Stay tuned for the next upload.